I really hesitate to say anything when someone is going to be talking about debate. I hesitate to even open my mouth. However, I do want to say that the reason I asked Steve to do this is because Steve Llano is the moderator for the, I don't know if that's your official title.
Director.
Director of the debate team at the university, but also he's one of the, more importantly, he's one of the CTL fellows. And at our meetings, it became clear that, as Steve would talk about how debate could be applied in classes outside speech, it became clear that this had much broader application. And so that faculty outside of speech could benefit from Steve's expertise. So that's why I asked him to do this today. So I really appreciate it. And please.
Okay, thanks for coming out, everybody. I know it's kind of a strange time to have a workshop with PAF looming over us, which is kind of a debate, isn't it? Although not a very fun one, and kind of one-sided too. What I wanted to do to start was I want you to bring your own questions and your own issues into this. I want this to be more of a workshop rather than a lecture. So what I would like to do is for you to brainstorm for just a few minutes. We'll maybe take 7 minutes or so. And I want you to come up with something that you do in your course that meets the following criteria. It's either an objective, a topic, or an assignment that you do in your course that it has to be done. It has to be covered. It's part of the basics of your course. It has to be covered. It's something that's difficult to do with the class in a creative way. It's something that you usually just resort to lecturing to them because it's the easiest way to get this painful stuff done. It's something that students find incredibly, wildly boring. They're not interested in it. They don't like it. They don't respond. And it's sort of that painful part of the class you have to get through in order to get to the stuff that you really enjoy teaching. So let's take about maybe 5 or 7 minutes and kind of try to come up with something like that or jot it down. And then from there, we'll use that as something we'll come back to during the course of the lecture to see how you can incorporate debate into your course and how it can be pretty fun for you. So I'll stay quiet and let you work on that for a few minutes. And if you got one right away, some people it was like, yep, I know exactly what this is. Maybe you can come up with another one, or maybe there's a couple of things you have to cover. But the procedure will be the same for turning this assignment like this into a debate for the students. think everybody's got something in mind, yes? That's good. All right, so this is actually kind of a timely workshop, and I didn't really work it out to be that way, but last night was the governor's debate, and it was sort of a good example, if you watched any of it, of all the reasons people hate debate. You know, it's no one's engaging with each other, everyone's sort of talking past each other, everyone's sort of saying their own things. So a lot of people have negative feelings about debate, where they feel like debate is a sort of a way to import anarchy into the classroom and have this sort of chaotic situation where the students all attack each other and then you get sued or something. This is what we're going to avoid. This model of debate is usually this sort of thing, where someone is sort of ignoring someone who's sort of shouting them down. And this is sort of the traditional idea that we get from our sort of bad political practices and other assumptions that people have about debate. The kind of debate that we do at St. John's is a debate that avoids all of this because it's highly formalized. And this is the most important thing about it, is it's highly structured, and there are requirements, just like any exam or paper that the students have to do. There are requirements in debate that have to be met for the students to be successful at it. Otherwise, they're considered to have lost the debate, and they're very competitive sorts of people, so they really don't like that. So it's an encouragement for them to follow the rules of the game in order to do well. And those rules are sort of basic things that I want to convey to you about the function of debate and how debate works. One of the people, and it's kind of weird to use him as a supporter for debate, but I'll explain how I get there in a second. But Paulo Freire is the famous Brazilian critical pedagogical theorist, says that the most important thing that you can do as a teacher is to teach people praxis, which is reflection and action combined. So everything they're doing, they're reflecting on it critically while they're doing it. And this is what it means to be a critical educator for him. And he did a lot of teaching in the rural areas of Brazil and got kicked out. He lost his passport, lost his citizenship for this kind of teaching. So it was pretty effective. It was a big threat to the government and a big threat to the businesses, so they booted him. But he says that this is what we should be doing in our classrooms, this kind of revolutionary activity. And I agree with him. And I think debate's the one thing I've found that really allows the students to have this kind of opportunity, to where while they're speaking, they're also critically reflecting on what they're saying and trying to predict what the other side is going to say next. And it's really quite an amazing thing to witness and to watch the students transform over time if you incorporate debate in your classroom. They get critical benefits out of doing a research paper, they get critical benefits out of studying for an exam, but they get amazing critical benefits out of engaging with their peers on debate. And I'm not sure exactly how that happens, but I really like it, and I think it's really rewarding to watch as a teacher how it happens. So, here are 4 terms that are somewhat related: debate, discussion, dialogue, and argument. In your mind, I'd like you to rank these by the one that's most preferred to you, that you would prefer to be in, and the one that's least preferred, the one you would not want to be in if you could avoid it. So you can either jot that down or you can do it in your head real quick, and then we'll kind of go around and see what people's... It's good to get a barometer of what your feeling about debate is before you start using it in the classroom. You can have ties too. There's not a lot of rules. So. If you think 2 of them are equal, you can say that too. Okay, would anyone like to share their ranking? How they put them in order? Yep.
I put down discussion, dialogue, debate, and argument.
Okay, discussion. Why discussion first? Why do you like that?
Well, discussion to me seems like it's involving more than just 2 people, while dialogue, it's 2 people. So I would like it to expand to include many more people.
Okay, and then debate. What's debate's relationship to dialogue for you?
Could say again?
What's debate's relationship to dialogue for you?
I think that the debate gives a more sense of a controversy, and I don't have that connotation with discussion.
Right. Okay, very good. Anybody else have something different, or?
I agree.
You agree?
Same feelings.
Same feelings?
Don't have anything else to add.
Yeah, pretty common. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, this seems like the way that people, I think it's a pretty standard way of ranking it, is to be in this first, and then this second because it's more limiting, and then that's more limiting. And then this is usually considered to be chaos. But as far as the theory goes, we're usually in this. This is sort of the natural, in the wild discourse that we're in, is argument. And these are the tools that we've come up to try to manage that wild pasture, field, or forest, or whatever you want to think about. So as somebody like me who's kind of really obsessed with my field, I'm like a natural collector. I always tell the students I'm sort of like the Steve Irwin of argument. I'm always like on the subway, I'm like, oh, there's one, and I sneak up on it, and I try to listen to what they're saying and try to use it as a model, because then I can incorporate it for teaching. But these are all different management techniques for something that's quite slippery. Because when you're in an argument, your opponent is often your judge. They're often the person evaluating it. They're also opposing you. There's no restrictions on how long people can speak. There are no rules about who can interrupt who. And there are no real structure about who can engage who and what the obligations are on engagement. And I think that's what we saw last night in the governor's debate, is that the format actually didn't manage the argument into something we could do something with, which is what these other ones attempt to do. There are formal rules for doing all of these things. I'm sort of an expert on this one. But if you're interested in dialogue, there's a great book. It was David Bohm, who's a physicist, wrote this great book on dialogue. Because he saw that in physics, he thought particles behaved the way people do in politics. Because he got his, he won the Nobel Prize for work in lasers, I think. There's probably scientists in here who can correct me. But he had worked in lasers, and he was like, particles of light and lasers function the way I think people ought to function in politics. So he wrote on dialogue. I guess after he had retired, he didn't have to worry about tenure or anything, so he write about whatever he wants. And his rules for dialogue actually sound a lot like the rules for debate. After I read the book, I thought, it's the same thing. He's saying everybody should be able to express within time limits what they think, and then people should incorporate what other people say into their offering to the group. And if there's no one there to represent the position that's missing, people should volunteer to be assigned to represent that position. So it sounds very much like a formal college debate or a formal academic debate or something that we don't get from the political sphere. So this might be something, I put this up here as a very simple exercise. It's something you can do with your students if you're thinking about doing a debate exercise, to kind of show them their own prejudgment of these different types of interaction, human interaction with language, and get them more comfortable with debating. Because as you'll see, the thing that I think is the most important for incorporating debate in the classroom is student comfort. A lot of your students will be reticent to stand up and speak in front of the class, and especially advocate. So I'm going to talk to you some strategies about managing student discomfort. And this is one of the ways, is to have a discussion about what the difference between these things are. Because everyone can rank it, and then they might not know why they prefer one to the other. And then of course you'll have a few students who are like, debate number 1, send them to me, okay? Okay, so here are some of the reasons why debate's important, and they're not the kind of things that in the public sphere we tend to think debate is valuable for. But this is what makes it a great teaching tool, makes it an important teaching tool. First, it clarifies the different sides of an issue. Sometimes an issue you might not think has a lot of different sides. The thing that you wrote down, the thing you have to teach, you might think it's a very straightforward thing, but at some point that may have been controversial. At some point, scholars may have disputed the importance of that. At some point, people might not have thought that was important to teach in the curriculum. So this is the kind of thing you can think as a debate can clarify the sides or the importance of an issue. So that might make your assignment that you wrote down a really good one to have a class debate about. Because it shows, it incorporates the students and puts them right in there into something that was controversial in your field and has been settled, and allows them to sort of think the way an expert in your field does, which is kind of a cool thing for them to embody. You don't have to teach them, you don't have to tell them that it's been settled. I mean, unless it's something like photosynthesis or something. I don't know. Maybe they don't know that that's been settled. I don't know. But or Copernican physics and astronomy or something. I don't know. It increases the understanding of issues because it gets people passionate about it. Even if you assign students aside, they increase their understanding by reading a bunch of stuff because they don't want to be beat. They want to come up with a good strategy to look good as they're sort of arguing against the other side. Even if they're assigned something, they tend to embrace this. So that's good. But it also increases the understanding of issues for the audience. Most of the time we forget that the purpose of debate is for an audience. It's not for the people participating in the debate. I think that's what they forgot last night. If you watch the governor's debate, they're all trying to convince each other. Well, they're never going to convince each other. You know, they all want to be governor. They all believe they could be governor. So they're not really going to be able to convince each other. But what they should be doing is convincing the audience. I think the only person who maybe understood that was maybe Andrew Cuomo. Understood that, but he's a very professional politician, so this would be second nature to him. That it's not really about the other people you're with, it's about the audience. So the other students in your classroom who aren't participating in that assignment that day are the ones who are learning from the debate. They're seeing the issue in stark contrast and thinking about it and synthesizing. They're saying, well, I really like that point from that side, I like that point from that side. So it makes it a very high-level activity for them rather than just listening to a lecture and writing down off of a PowerPoint. They're listening to their peers advocate different views from the reading that they might have done, and it makes it a synthesis activity for the audience. So it's really good for the rest of the class. And they get into it too. They really get into it. I remember I used to do, when I was at the University of Pittsburgh, we did a public speaking debate series between me and another class, and we came up with the topics, and we had one, so I would say, okay, my class will be pro on this issue, and your class will be con. And they never met each other. They just worked until the day of the debate, and then they met each other. And the classes got so behind themselves that one of the classes accused the other class of cheating with the time signals. So then we had to come up with rules about who can time and who's the official timekeeper. Because at the end of the debate, somebody, they sat on separate sides. It was very congressional. They sat on different sides of the room, and somebody stood up and accused my class of cheating with the time signals, and they were like, "No, you can time. We don't care. We're going to win anyway." Like fanning the flames. So that was kind of fun. It was sort of like a sporting competition. It was kind of fun, and the students really learned a lot out of it. They got a lot out of it, and they also got to write their own evaluation forms. So they got to synthesize sort of the way they saw the debate, and then we scanned those and put those up on a website so anybody could read anonymous comments from the audience. So it was very cool. So that's kind of a large-scale application of this. But you can do it in a class as small as 10 or 20. You can easily have the same energy, high energy, very much like they get for professional football or whatever nonsense they engage in on the weekends. It refines discussion and discourse on the issues. So you'll find that when you go to lecture or go to teach this stuff later, the students have a much more refined appreciation for the details of that subject. And they'll say, well, Professor, like in the debate, we saw this and this, so which argument is better there, or which side is better there? And they retain it. It's something that was engaging, and it helps refine conversation on those important issues in your field or in your class. And then it also is a great way to disseminate information because it's entertaining. You can get a lot of information. So last night I really liked Jimmy McMillan's crazy antics. So I Googled him, and I read a lot about the Rent is Too Damn High party and their advocacy and what they want to do to the government. And I was shocked, but it's a great way of disseminating that information. So students, when I've assigned debate before, have come to me and say, that weird esoteric thing that came up in the debate, it was the only thing I've ever looked up on Wikipedia or Google that wasn't related to my own interests. Like it was something from the class I wanted to learn more about, so I typed in that person's name and that thing, and I thought that was really cool. So it's a wonderful way to sort of open their eyes to what it is to do, the other 2/3 of your job that they don't really see you get to do. Okay, so let's talk about student comfort. Let's say you want to have a debate. You might want to do it about, one of these issues that you had there. How do you get the students to participate in the debate? How do you get them to not be scared? The first and most simple one is if you're going to have the debate, you want to think of maybe different positions on that subject that you teach that you could take. That it's not valuable, that it might be valuable in combination with something else. You can maybe come up with 3 or 4. The easiest to do is maybe come up with 2, but if you want to have some different positions for students to have, you could poll them and find out how they feel about it. Like, oh, I think this is very important. I don't think it's that important. I think it's completely unimportant. And those can be the different positions that they can have in the debate, in the class debate. Or you can just have different subsets of the topic. I don't know what it is that you've written down. We'll get to that in a little bit. But there could be different subsets of it where you can say, here are the different subsets. Who would like to be in the group debating this subset or that one? And then you put the students into that group. They all work together like a group project, but you don't tell them who should be for and who should be con on the debate. You let them sort that out as part of the rules of the group project. And that really helps with the anxiety quite a bit. Because what you explain to them, and this is the way I've done it with intro classes or core classes, is you can say, look, this is like a group project. The 4 of you, or 6 of you, however many you put in the group, the 4 of you, usually I do 4, I don't know why, but you're working together on this. So you're all researching together, you're coming up with the arguments together, you're going to be held accountable for what everyone says, as far as its quality. But as far as who speaks in favor or who speaks against, you can work that out. And it works really well. They seem to figure that out as part of the rules of the group. Instead of saying, okay, death penalty, you're in favor of it, you're against it. Well, that puts a huge amount of anxiety on the student because they've never been taught this before. In the public schools, they're not getting this anymore. They're not getting advocacy teaching, unless they go to a really nice high school and join the debate team, like Bronx Science or one of these great schools around here that has a huge debate program. They're not getting it. They're getting standardized testing. So they have a very, very stark, and you've probably noticed it in your class, they have a very stark and they're very committed to this idea of fact and opinion and nothing in between. Like they're like, well, it's just my opinion, but you hear them, like I call this argument divestment. They do this all the time in my class. So I say, well, what do you feel about this? And I'm like, well, it's just my opinion, but. And then they make an argument. And I'm like, well, why did you say it's just my opinion, though? Because it's just my opinion. It's not It's not fact. It's not true. It's just my opinion. I was like, well, do you believe it? And they're like, they find that irrelevant, right? So it's a really weird rhetorical skill set that they have coming into the university. Very, very weird. And it seems like, in my opinion, gets them out of being attacked because they're saying something that is, by definition, irrelevant. Which is a sad thing to think if they think their opinions are that worthless. The other thing is they'll also say, you know, I always have this joke that I teach them when I'm teaching debate. It's like, if you're talking to someone you care about, your partner, someone you're dating, somebody in your family, and you're having an intense discussion about something you think they should do, and they say, wait a second, are you trying to argue with me? What's the right answer to that? What's the right answer to that? And they always say, well, no is the right answer. I'm like, oh, very good, right? So you can negotiate your rhetorical environment in your interpersonal relationships. That's good. Because argument's a dirty word. So that's a funny thing to think about. Is you're always trying to get out of this. No, I just care. I just really care about you. Or no, I'm not arguing with you. I just want you to know what's right for you. Or I just want you to know that I feel... So this is the situation we're in. So to assign them and say, you're going to argue for this or against this, and to assign them around the room, it stresses them out. Because they're doing something that's really, really bad. It's the thing that would shatter all their interpersonal relationships. So you want to consider that when you assign a debate project. And one of the things to do is let the group. So affiliate interest is what I call this with. Like, make them all a group based on their level of interest in the topic. And let them choose who's for and who's against, who's going to speak when. And you make it a group project with them all helping each other out with the research. If you're going to go that way. We'll talk about research in a few minutes. Open practices. This is like if you've ever learned a card game, you play an open hand first. You know, if you're with your friends and they all want to play some crazy card game, you're like, oh, let's play an open-faced. You know, everyone can see the strategy. So you can do a couple of those. Build those in. And let volunteers do those separate from the group. Because you'll have a few students who really take to this. They'll really want to do it. So you'll have a few that will want to do it, and you can sort of narrate what's happening. So I use this a lot when we're teaching. We do outreach programs in New York City schools for debate. So we do this a lot to where we'll have them and they're kind of reticent, shy 14-year-olds. We're like, okay, come to the podium. And I'll be like, okay, so this is the opening speech. So what Jim is doing, he's making a great argument of why this should be done, and he's saying how it should be done, and he's quoting the right information from the packet that supports his side, and he's really getting into it, and he's got great projection and great style, and it's very exciting, and he draws his speech to a close. Okay, thanks. And then you sit them down. So like standing there and I'm sort of narrating what they're supposed to be doing. And it kind of helps them. They kind of giggle. They think it's kind of silly. But it's sort of like a sportscaster kind of thing. But it shows them what they should be doing. And it's a way of modeling without having to do it myself. Because if I had to debate in front of the debaters, they would never listen to me again because I'm terrible at it. I'm really terrible at it. And I really have a lot of admiration for what they do in competition. It blows my mind. I could never do it that well. But I don't let them know this. Please don't let them know this or they'll all leave. But I did have to debate once, a demonstration debate. It was a disaster because I really don't know what I'm doing. And they all saw it and they were like, oh, well, maybe you're just tired. Because this was
say that it's an example of what not to do, right?
Yeah. Well, they all started, someone started a rumor that I was holding myself back because I didn't want them to feel like they could, that they couldn't do it to my level. So I was holding myself back so they feel more comfortable. I let that rumor fester. It's still going around the team. I'm like, oh, don't believe that. He intentionally hamstrung himself. I'm like, I like that. I couldn't have thought of that. That's good. I'll let them, they can manage me. That'd be great. So open practice also could be, you have a simple topic or something related and have them do a debate about something rather silly and have them sort of do it. And then the class can comment on, don't just be the only person who contributes to what the model should look like. Let them say, well, I really liked the way so-and-so spoke, or I liked the way she responded to arguments. Let them kind of chime in, because they're the audience for this. And it's a rare thing to have the audience be able to say, oh, I really liked this, I really didn't like that. In my debate class now, that's like the most valuable thing. So I just kind of sit at the back, and they all sort of like comment on the debate, and they kind of regulate themselves, and the debaters defend themselves, saying, well, here's what I was trying to do. And they're like, oh, okay, I see it now. And so it helps them manage their skills as far as advocacy, communication. It's really a great thing. So reserve some time for the assignment, not just for like one-shot presentation, you get graded, that's it. That will make them reticent to participate and not want to show up and not want to participate in the group. But if you show them what it's going to look like and you praise the demonstration, that's the best kind of modeling you can have. It'll make the students a lot more willing to participate in the real debate. Swap research. This is kind of a dirty trick. So if you have your groups assigned and you say, okay, you're going to be in favor of the topic and you're going to be against, go research, and you'll have to turn in a research paper or a packet of some kind that is useful to show that to prove that you've done the research. So sometimes I have an annotated bibliography that I assign. Sometimes I assign them to do sort of a brief, like here are the 3 major points that we're going to make with hyperlinks or with evidence quoted in it. That's what I'll assign for research sometimes. And then on the day of the debate, I have them trade information with the other side and debate the other side based on the information that other group researched. Now that kind of freaks them out because they worked really hard on it, but it's kind of good because it also kind of lowers the expectation of doing very well, and also kind of makes them have to process some information pretty quickly. But that's a way you can get them away from the worst possible situation, which is you have one group of students who's really committed and are really convicted that their side is right, and one group who doesn't really care that much. That can be a pretty lopsided debate. So doing the evidence switch, saying, okay, now you guys are switching sides, and your research packet to the other group. They're like, oh, now you have about 10 minutes to read that and prepare for the other side. It kind of shows them the value of being informed about at least 2 of the sides of the controversy. But it also really shocks the other groups too. You know. Did you have a question? You had your hand up.
You answered it.
Yeah. So as far as research goes, if you're nervous about that, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, the best thing to do is to find some articles or maybe a couple of scholarly articles on this issue in your field and assign those and say, this is where the information for the debate comes from, are these 2 or 3 articles. So the benefit of that is everyone has done the same reading and everyone has access to the same information, so it makes the audience a lot more keen observers and keen critics of the debate as it happened, because some of the students will say, well, and you also check who did their reading, because some of them will say, well, actually here you missed this paragraph and this seems pretty, and it'll always be the person who you don't think is doing anything. That's the way it's been from my experience. I'm like, whoa, really? It's like so-and-so actually read the entire article. Wow, that's cool. Because they sort of get a charge out of being able to contribute in this competitive way. They really like that. Most students do. Even the ones who you don't think will like it are the ones who really take to it. It's always sort of the opposite for me. And polling people's convictions is another way to deal with student comfort. To figure out who's the most sold on this issue and who's the one who doesn't care the most. And sometimes it's good to pair those people up together, and sometimes it's really good to make sure that, you just want to make sure that people who are really convinced on one side are not together and aren't going against a group of students who are checked out. You want to mix that up, because then no one is going to really enjoy or benefit from the assignment if it's lopsided like that. And that's for more if you're teaching a class like that has political issues involved in. I think all of us probably teach a course that's directly tied to political controversy in the world in some way. You can work it in some way. I bet if you thought about it, even if you're teaching sort of a language class, there's political controversies in that country that are related to culture, and culture is related to language, so you can make the jump that way. So that's always a place you can go for debate topics, or things that you want them to argue about. Okay, here are the things you want to think about. Now that you've got student comfort out of the way, you have some strategies about how to get them to talk or to not be scared about the assignment and not show up. How do we plan for having a debate assignment? Well, the first one is you have to come up with a very clear and distinct topic. This is the part where I think most people fail when they're coming up with a class debate. Because in argument theory and in debating, the things that make for a good debate are the things that we usually don't use. So I saw there was a debate about immigration policy in D'Angelo last week. I didn't know anything about it. I wasn't involved with it or anything. But they had it as a question. You know, should U.S. immigration policy be more lenient? Question mark. Now this makes the worst kind of topic because a question, as we know, a question is open-ended. So both sides can say something completely different to that and totally miss each other. And then they only end up talking to partisans in the audience. And there's absolutely no interaction of those two camps. So instead of phrasing it as a question, always phrase it as a declarative sentence. And I think my next slide shows some examples of this. So read these here. This is the same thing, phrased in different ways. And then we'll try to guess which one you think might be the best topic. So anybody want to have a guess? Which one would provide you for the best debate, do you think? And I'll tell you it's hard because in American collegiate debate, the kind of debate that we don't do at St. John's, traditional American policy debate, the setting of the topic is the most controversial thing that happens in the debate community, bar none. So controversial that the meeting is live streamed on the internet with a chat room, just live, the entire meeting determining the topic, to where people are in the chat room arguing back to the committee all over. It has thousands of people in this chat room, and the committee are the people who have the vote on the way the topic is voted. And every little word is argued, and every little word has to be found. There has to be some literature base for that word. And we don't do this kind of debate. We do the more European style here. We do the international style here. So, yes?
I would pick the second one.
The second one. The issue of military spending is something that has pros and cons. Okay. Any other candidates?
The third. Oh, sorry.
Third one?
Me? Third.
This one?
Yeah. I'll go with 4.
4?
4 or 5.
4 or 5? We're all over the place here. Okay, so I'll go down these and I'll tell you why I think they're bad or good topics from the perspective of people. Now, they might be really cool debates to listen to. That's not what I'm judging these on. But let's think about them in terms of for the classroom. So this one no one said, and that's good because this is way too open-ended. And the burden of what the one side has to prove is quite light. I think anything could be further investigated. And I think the other side doesn't have a lot to say. It's like, what, it's not good to investigate things? It's, no, we already know. I mean, it's like the joke my friend and I always have is that we're going to write a paper someday that the last paragraph says. And that's all the research that's been done on this. No further investigation is required. Nothing more can be said on this topic, which is sort of the opposite of what any professional journal last paragraph essay would say. We thought it would be a funny joke. But, I mean, we're not, so-called, but we're trying to be. The next one, the issue of military spending is something that has pros and cons. Well, this one also is problematic for teaching because what doesn't have pros and cons? What would the other side say to this? So one of the principles is you have to make sure that there's an equal balance of what each group can say. There's equal access to things they could say that have meaning. The issue of military spending is the most important issue in this election. This one's pretty good. This one's pretty good because it has within it the thing that you really want to look for, which is a term, most important, that really sets what the duties of both sides are. Clear duties. So one side has to say, here's the evidence that shows that this is the issue that matters the most. Now they can do that however they want. They can say, according to this research, the voters think it's the most important thing. Or according to the situation our country is in, military spending is the most important issue facing us, regardless of what the people think. It's just on some metaphysical level it is. Or the candidates talk about it, like whatever they want to do. The other side just has to say, no, there are other issues that are more important. So that clearly delineates the responsibilities of the students to address that statement or to talk about that statement. So think about it as a point of departure.
Couldn't that also be problematic? Because you're giving, the other side has so much leeway of what they can talk about, and they could take the debate off in a totally different direction. Like,
Yeah, and that's the problem with it, is because even though it does have this nice phrase, most important, for newer debaters or for classroom debate, it can be tough if someone figures out the trick on the other side and they can say, all we have to prove to you is that it's not the most important, that it's important, but other issues are equally important. Now that can make an interesting debate, but for some students that might be a bit complex. Maybe if you did a few of these assignments, you could do something like that. But that is sort of the problem. I think Ben's right. It's sort of the problem with the wording of this, is that it does provide a nice trick to the other side and puts a lot of the burden on the pro side. These two are pretty good. The issue of military spending should not be decided by referendum. That's very clear. Right? So this kind of flips it the other way from this one, which is that, so we think military spending is something that should not be left up to the people. Referendums are bad for issues like this. It should be left up to politicians and professionals, etc. And the other side can say, well, no, there's something special about military spending. There's something unique about it that means that it's best decided by referendum. They can say that. And then this one is a little bit weird in its wording. So it's a good idea that the military should maybe have some say, but it's also might be the status quo, the way things are right now. So a topic is not very good if it pushes the students to argue for something that is current or that is the way things are, right? The president should be elected every 4 years. Well, it's hard to argue for that because it's the way things already are. And I think this is the way things already are on one side. It says it's not something the military should have some influence over, not in some, or kind of problematic in the way this is worded, so this is kind of confusing. So you just want to make sure it's clear. I think the best two are probably these two, but they do have issues with them itself. It's kind of, you want the wording to be something where clear duties are put forward to both sides, and the students know what they would have to say to convince you that that statement is true. And that's the way you should teach it. You should say, what, you can even put it up there and say, what would each side need to do to tell you, to convince you this is true? What would they need to provide? And then after you get past the first few answers, which will be statistics, research, and that's what they'll say, and they'll think that's the end of it. But you can say, well, what kind of research? What kind of things would they need to say? Like, what kind of issues would you expect them to bring up? And then I'll create a map for everyone as to what they might want to do during their research time to work on their debates, on what they're going to say. So here's some principles for putting the topic together. Declarative sentence, we talked about that. Clearly worded. A clear action, belief, or plan. Something like, I don't know what you have for your assignment you find boring, but you can word it in a way to where it's very clear that this is the belief that people should have, and this is the statement that people should have, or the thing that they should do. At least 2 distinct positions. There could be 3 or 4, like the one that Ben was saying. It can go really off the rails. He's right. But you can also have 5 or 6 possible positions in a debate if you wanted to. Some kind of a change is required. I think that's good. So if we agree with it, we're really changing things. We're moving things into a different realm. There's really something at stake. Like all of these things are going to be out of balance if we change our mind this way or that. And there should be some kind of burden built into it. There should be something that both sides have to do. There shouldn't be that sort of fallacious way that people argue, which is, no, prove it, no, I don't believe you, prove it, no. To where someone can sit comfortably and just request more and more proof ad infinitum. The kind of arguments you've been in for a while. It's called the appeal to ignorance, and that's when people say, prove to me it's not the case. Like you're trying to advocate for something. They're trying to advocate for something, and you're like, no, you're wrong. Prove to me it's not the case. And you're like stuck trying to come up for evidence that proves that their view is wrong. And they're like, nope, not good enough, not good enough. So it's a nice trick people play on each other. Well, I guess it's not a nice trick, but it's a trick people do play on each other. And you want to avoid that by making sure both sides have something positive that they have to do. They can't just demand more proof. Right? That makes for a boring debate. Or one that doesn't teach anybody anything. Okay, so research. I kind of talked about this already, getting ahead of myself. You can assign articles. Right? You can say, we should teach the controversy. This is the phrase that has been used by that guy, David, I forgot his name. But anyway, he sort of does the Student Bill of Rights in Texas. He has the book, the 100 Most Dangerous Professors. Then my friend sends an application in every year to be in. He puts together a packet like he's applying for a job. And he's like, see, I'm very socialist. I'm very liberal. I'm a real danger to the students. I really deserve to be included. And he never gets included. But he treats it like a formal job application. It's quite funny. His name is David Horowitz. Yeah, thank you. David Horowitz says we should be teaching the controversy. That's what he says. We shouldn't be teaching all this liberal nonsense. Actually, I don't agree with him politically, but I do like this statement. So I stole it from him for nefarious liberal purposes. Try to find some articles that talk about the thing that you have to teach in a controversial way. Try to find a couple articles that talk about maybe the history of how that decision was made, or you can even go back into the archives and look for a couple of articles from when that was being debated, or when that was current, to put the students in the mindset of that time and place to where they can debate that issue, instead of you just sort of lecturing those principles to them. To where they see that these were decisions human beings made under strife, or under stress, or under duress, and this was the decision they made, and we're kind of stuck with that. So it gives them a real political consciousness. These things aren't written in stone, they're not things to memorize. So teaching the controversy is quite cool. Student research groups is another way of doing it. Now these would be separate from the debating groups, which would be, okay, now if we're going to debate this in class, what things do we need to know to make the debate good? And the students will brainstorm, you can fill up the board with the ideas, and you can say, okay, now let's affiliate with who would like to research what. And they produce maybe a 4 or 5 page research packet, or maybe a annotated bibliography, or something that would be useful to the groups who are going to be debating those issues. So that allows students to work across groups and work with many different kinds of people. I think that's kind of a cool thing. Starter research packets. Now this is something that you can do if you think the topic is a bit too hard for the students. You can create sort of a starter with some absences, some gaps in it. And you can use technology to do that as well. There's Google Documents where you can co-author a document with students. So you can create a document and leave things out. Say, here's the link to your research document. Here's what I provided. Now you have to sort of fill in the gaps with additional research, hyperlinks, whatever you want them to do. And then that document becomes something that you and the students wrote together, and then the whole class can see it and share it and use it for the debate assignment. I think that's a nice way to kind of kickstart debate research for them. The final one, oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
I'll let you finish.
Okay, the last one is one with and one without, and this is kind of a nice way to show the students the value of research, is you take the topic and you say, "Good, let's have a debate without doing any research, and let's see how satisfactory that is." And even though they'll like that, they'll like the fact that they don't have to do any research, they won't like the result, and they'll be confused as to why they didn't like the debate, participating in it, or anything. And they'll say, well, we weren't sure what anybody was saying was true. They'll feel really adrift, and you say, okay, well now you kind of understand what we're going for with the research part of the assignment. So let's do the assignment again, but let's do research this time. And then we'll see if it's any better. And they'll understand better. A lot of times, you know, I'm guilty of this, we sort of send students to the library without any kind of plan, or without any kind of questions, or without any kind of idea of what they're looking for in mind. We're like, okay, go research it, find 5 or 6 sources, and then put your assignment together and we'll be fine. But this kind of really shows them functionally what gaps are being shored up with that research. And I think it's a nice way of really putting their feet to the fire and say, okay, you know, it's sort of like, I guess those old 50s shows where they make the kids smoke the whole pack of cigarettes because they like to smoke, or they're saying, see what you're doing? You know, this kind of thing. But healthier. It's like, oh, you want to just go through the world without research? Well, then fine. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, just a couple of things you might consider using too. These are more ready-made, but CQ Researcher.
Oh, yeah.
What's it called?
CQ Researcher.
CQ?
Yeah, Congressional Quarterly.
All right.
They're kind of boring reading just because they take pains to be as balanced as possible, but they kind of highlight issues like various current controversial issues.
Yeah, that's an amazing resource for us. We love that.
Opposing Viewpoints is also really good. That's just like different articles on taking different positions on the same issue.
Yeah, so if you're teaching a science course, you might find in Opposing Viewpoints some stuff on stem cell research that could be useful, starter research stuff.
Yeah, or nuclear
for your class, or nuclear power, or anything that you're teaching. In Opposing Viewpoints, you can find something controversial that the principles of that debate are located in the field. I guarantee it. You might be thinking, oh, I don't know, but I bet if you sort of brainstorm, you can kind of see. I mean, we're kind of trained. You know, John Dewey says sort of that if you take enough training, you become occupational psychotic. You see your field everywhere, right? So occupational psychosis, John Dewey's great term, is kind of what grad school I think did to all of us. And but I think it's useful for this assignment because you can use your occupational psychosis to find your field everywhere, right? You can find elements of it everywhere, and then that can generate some controversial issues that you can use for your students for this assignment. So that's what I'll say on research. I think there's a lot of good ways to, this assignment also shows students that research can be really fun and entertaining because it's sort of competitive. Like you can have the class vote at the end who they thought won the debate. I've had some people I've helped with debates who give candy, give a little candy or something, so to make it a little bit more fun, but not so cutthroat that like, okay, the winning team gets an A, and you know, then you'll have people weeping in your office at all hours, so don't do that. But I don't know, if you have all my debate students, and they'll love that, but they're kind of rare. Okay, the last thing you have to consider, and probably the least important, is the format of the debate. And the big thing about format is just make sure the students have an obligation to interact with each other, that they have to talk about what the other side said, and make that a part of your rubric. They can't just say a pre-written speech. I think that's the most important part. So if you don't do that, what I've had in the past is students will pre-write in their group something, and they'll just read it, and then sit down. And the other side, regardless of what that side has said, will read what they wrote in the library or on Instant Messenger or on their phone or whatever, however they write these days. They'll just read that, pre-written, and they won't attempt to interact anything that they're saying, even though there'll be clear connections to where they can really engage with what they've said. So the important thing about the rubric is make sure you assign a large part of the score, or a large part of how you're evaluating it, to the fact that did they take into account what the other side said. And so the best way to do that for the format is to make sure that speakers take turns from each side. So one side speaks, then the other side, then the other side, then the other side. So if you have 2 versus 2, everybody gets one speech, and then maybe you could say question and answer from the audience, so the students could interact if you want, for like a few minutes. And then one person from each side could sort of give a summary speech, or a rebuttal speech for a couple of minutes. So you could do something that simple, and that's fine. It only takes like maybe 40 minutes or 50 minutes, and you have plenty of time to discuss the debate with the students afterwards. You can also incorporate questioning into it however you want. Sometimes you can have a cross-examination period where the person who just spoke is asked questions by the person on the other side who is about to speak. So they can have maybe 2 minutes to ask them questions, and then they answer the questions. You can do that. You can also do what we do in the style that we do is we have the questioning as a part of the speech. So everyone gets a 7-minute speech in competitive debate, and the other side will be sitting there. And while the speaker is talking, the other side at designated times can be like, "Sir, on that," and they can stand up. "On that, excuse me, can I have a point?" And it's up to the speaker whether they accept them or not. They can be like, "No, thank you," and then the person has to sit down. But they wait like 10 or 20 seconds, they can be back up again. And sometimes it gets pretty dicey. So I'm doing this debate class, and yesterday we had our second formal debate. And the other side was trying to ask the question, and finally she was just like, "No." And the whole class just thought this was great. Because she's a very quiet and polite young lady. And they really brought out, it was like, "No." And this, whoa. And I'm like, "No, it's perfectly acceptable. It's fine." So, it's your speech. You should control the time. So that's one way you can do it. Now, if you don't feel comfortable with that, there's no reason you should do that, because that can get kind of chaotic. But that's the way it's done, sort of as the global standard of how questioning is done during speeches. It's the 4 minutes in the middle. People can try to ask questions, and the person can take as many or as few as they'd like. And then, once they turn over, the person has about 10 or 20 seconds to ask a question or make a point. That makes it more dynamic. But the cross-examination method is fine too, and that actually might be something better for a rubric, because you can separate how they do in questioning and answering questions as a part of their assessment, as well as how well they do in the speaking and how well they do in responding to things. So it diversifies how they're assessed, if you want to assess them that way. You might not want to assess them that way. You just might want to assess them like you would in an essay or exam on command of the material. That's fine too. This is like, whether you want to do essay or Scantron. I think debate can be seen as a format like that as well. Like whether you want to do a multiple choice or fill in the blank or an essay or however you want to do, or even oral exam. This could be counted as an oral exam. You could use those rubrics as well. You don't have to grade the argumentative performance if you don't want to. So I just wanted to put that out there. I always grade part of it, but I'm familiar with it, so it comes naturally to me to want to do that. But there's no real reason why you should do that, except to maybe say, like you would grammar or style when you're grading an essay, and say, well, your speaking style really interfered with your ability to convey the importance of the material, or the hesitations in your speech really hurt your ability for the audience to understand your point. Just like you would correct students' grammar or fluency in an essay, even though that's not really what you're grading. I think it can work like that. So about 5 minutes is sort of maybe the minimum you might want to do. You can do 3 maybe for the practice, but 5 is probably about the length you'd want for them to be able to say something where you can actually assess their performance or assess the content that they're bringing across to you. And then you want to think about how they can interact with other people. Like, can they talk to the other people on their team, or do they get time that's like a timeout where they can re-strategize and talk to each other? Can members of the audience help them out? Is that a possible thing? So there's one model I've seen done, which is sort of a tag team debate, where everyone's responsible for the material. So if one person doesn't know the answer to the question, they can sort of tag someone in who, and say, "Oh, I think, Bob knows that." And Bob's like, "Oh, what?" It's keeps everybody on their toes, right? Because they know that one of their friends might tag them in, so they kind of have to pay attention to the debate. And then they have to stand up and contribute to the debate, and then they sit down. So, you can be creative with it. There's no real reason it should be formed. The only principle I would urge you to burn into your head is make sure they have to interact with each other. Just think about all the horrible presidential debates and horrible governor debates that we're going to be subjected to in our lifetimes. We want to try to mitigate that. So one of the places we do that is the classroom. And I think if we give students a taste for what debate is really like, then they might start to reject these terrible formats where people just sort of speak into the void, for 2 minutes and then have 30 seconds to speak into the void again, like the thing last night, where no one really dealt with what anyone else was saying. It made it sort of an incomprehensible text. That's sort of what we ended up with if you look at the debate as a whole. So you want to avoid that. So as far as format goes, you can do whatever you want. I have more specific format information I can share with you if you'd like to mirror one of the global styles. Almost every country has their own national style of debate. There are also international styles of debate that international organizations that govern competitive high school and collegiate debate have agreed upon as the go-to formats. That's what we do here, is we do the World Championship style of debating. It's called British Parliamentary. And you could do that in your class as well. And you can also do the World Schools format, which is 3 versus 3, and that's the international high school standard of debating. That's kind of like the debate Olympics. Every nation chooses their national team, and you go and debate for your country. So it's kind of a cool tournament. So these high school kids are quite smarter than me. Okay, so we're running out of time here. I was going to talk about some basic skills, but I can do this quite quickly. Is that you want to point out to students there's a difference between giving a speech and giving an argument. And one of them is they have to prove something. They have to offer information. They have to prove something. They also have a burden. These are just basic democratic practices in public argument. They have to respond to things. So if one side says, if we do this, it will create this bad result, or if we believe this, we'll be immoral people. They have a burden to respond to that. They have to say, well, they tell you that this would make us immoral, but how would it make us immoral when we have examples or analogs that we do this kind of thinking all the time? That kind of thing. Makes the debate better. And then the difference between constructive speaking, building an argument, refutation, sort of deconstructing an argument, and rebuttal, which is rebuilding an argument, or saying they're wrong. So if you distinguish these different types of speaking for them, or these different styles of dealing with the debate, it might help the debate go a bit smoother. But I kind of wanted to talk to you about helping you put, I don't want to go into too much detail with this stuff, so I wanted to help you sort of put together the basics of a debate assignment for the stuff that you jotted down. So maybe we'll get into that, if you'd like. So I'm curious what kind of stuff you think that you might want to talk about, or the stuff that you...
Steve, you already have a rubric set up for grading?
Yeah, I should have brought one. I have one that I made for my debate class, and I made it very simple because I sort of I had the students suggest the way they wanted to be graded. So I have a class blog, so I made the blog topic be, how should we assess these debates? What should we be looking for? And they came up with persuasiveness. Did they move us in one direction or another? They might not have. So there's this map, this sort of map my friend came up with about how debates work. Like, you're not always looking for a touchdown if you're thinking about football. You're looking for who moved the ball the most yards. Because it's going to be very rare that a student debater is going to convince you that you were completely wrong in your soul about the issue they're talking about. But they definitely will bring up something you hadn't thought about. And they might even make you think, wow, I totally had that wrong. That's kind of a compelling point of view. So they're moving the ball up and down, and so at the end, whoever had the most total yards should win. So that's sort of the functional sports metaphor for persuasiveness that my friend came up with in his textbook about debating. Effectiveness, style, speaking style, were they pleasant to listen to, were they organized? And then the other one was support. Did they give adequate examples and proof for what they were saying, or did they just let it hang? Did they just let it hang? And that's the sort of, those are the three areas that I broke the points down into. So I made it a 300-point assignment. I have a sort of a 1 to 10, and they circle, and they offer justification. So then I have them scan these in, and then the students can see how all their peers would have graded them. So it's kind of a nice feedback system. I like it. But I can email that to you, any of you, if you would like to see that rubric. But that's a rubric that's looking at, I mean, it's a debate course, so I'm looking at the style and stuff. You can use, I bet you could adapt your rubric from an essay or a group project to this very easily with minimal changes. And I think it's kind of an adventure. If you'd like to try to grade the grammar of speaking, that would be great, because I think one of the things that I think we do pretty well serving our students with writing reinforcement, the importance of writing. But as far as verbal, they get the 1000C class and that's about it. And then I think in the business world, they're going to be doing a lot more presentations than they are writing 5-paragraph essays. So I think it'd be nice if you can reinforce those things in your courses about what it is to be a good speaker, what makes an audience want to listen to somebody, just general fluency stuff. Because we go to conferences all the time and we complain about our colleagues reading the paper. We know it's good, we know it's bad. We can pass this on to our students. I think it's kind of a valuable thing. Are there any other questions, or anybody want help with their what they wrote down? Maybe we can think them out. Yeah.
I would love help. Yeah, I had an idea for next week. This may not work, but we have in the master's level classes, I'm in communication sciences and disorders. So one of the topics is teaching children to speak who have phonological impairment. Okay, so teaching children who are bilingual to speak who have phonological impairment. Okay, so phonological impairment is a speech impairment where children just don't learn to speak normally, and there's sort of there's probably an underlying neurological impairment, but we really don't know why in most cases. So so the issue is, I thought the issue or debate issue could be whether children, bilingual children who have phonological impairment, should be taught to speak in one language, English, or in the languages of the family and community. Okay? Now, the feeling is, I mean, if whatever they read, it's going to say they should be taught in the languages of the family and the community. Okay, you know, because you don't want to isolate these children any more than they're already isolated, right? Okay, but the issue is that we don't really know, we know very little about what actually is going on with children, people who are learning 2 languages or 3 simultaneously. Okay, so if we don't know what the problem is, we don't know why, you know, then there's an argument to say, you know, whether we should teach them in one language or more. In other words, I want to use it, I was thinking of trying to use it as a technique to get the students to think about what is underlying the problem. See, I'm a little vague because I'm just thinking about it myself, you know?
From what you're saying, it sounds perfect for a debate assignment. Because one of the things that will reinforce is the importance of scientific rigor. That's what it sounds like. Because there's a rush, you know, as the data's coming in, the rush would be to say, oh, everything seems to support.
Yeah, it's so new.
Everything seems to support, we should teach them in their native language. But one of the things that the other side could say is, hold up, what about the importance of scientific inquiry here? What about the importance of scientific rigor? Do we have enough data to make this judgment?
Right.
So they're really sort of reinforcing those kind of things that I think you would want your master's students to always keep in mind when they go out and do field research and when they're evaluating the research of their colleagues.
And
in
then
the future.
there's kind of subtopics where, you know, then I don't know if I can incorporate this, but there's subtopics where we could say, you know, something like, to be a little less vague and say, okay, teach one language for a month, and then teach the other language, or teach the both languages in the same session. Do you know what I mean? So I've been thinking it both ways, whereas, I mean, I'm afraid that everybody will say, no, of course you have to teach all the languages of your community, and then nobody will want to do the other side. That's my concern.
I think as far as method goes, like the thing you were saying about teach one month, teach one the second month, that's something that probably should be left up to the students to determine how they want to propose that this is done. Because that can create a lot of variance in the debate assignment and make it new every time, because I assume you'll have many different groups doing the same topic. So you want the audience to have a chance to get something new every time. So one of the things you could say, like you could phrase the topic being that students with phonological impairment should be taught in the language of their family or community. That's a great topic, just right like that. So the side in favor of it, then the question becomes, well, how do they propose that should be done, or how do you deal with that? And then the other thing I would say to what you're saying that might help you get some relief to the project, some tactile relief to it, is you can think about doing things that are, what's the fancy word for that? Where you go from one discipline to the other? Interdisciplinary, yeah, that fancy buzzword. I think I have a mental block on the word. something wrong with me. But interdisciplinary, so you can look to the more narrative research from education about whether or not this strategy works in the classroom, or whether or not these students are enculturated in the school. Like if they're being taught in their native tongue, in the school in a special program, are they really interacting with their peers outside of that program? Are they ostracized within that community? What does that on-the-ground ethnographic stuff say? And that can be good ammunition for the other side. And also they can talk about science as well. So the cool thing about your issue or your assignment that you generate is it shows how debate can reinforce all those bigger principles of your field without you even thinking about it. Like, so here we have this robust defense. Students are going to have to get up and explain why the scientific method is important. Now, how often are they called on the carpet to defend that? I mean, you know, it's like, think about our political debates about healthcare. Very few people have that grammar to be able to defend the principles of what a government should protect. You know?
That's a really good
it's kind of a missing element, so that's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah. Right, because I'm sitting here saying why, but you're telling me, okay, make that an argument. You know, why does everybody think this is real?
Yeah,
So,
let the students answer that question.
Yeah.
And like if you don't feel comfortable, if you feel unsettled about the debate, you feel like you've leaned to one side already.
Well,
You don't have to grade the debate
does.
part. You can just grade their assessment of the material, the quality of their research, and the quality of that presentation.
And then just one other point,
Sure.
you know, this is one class, you know, where there's so much to teach in our 14 master's level classes to these people who will be professionals, that this is one class, do you know what I'm saying? So, you know, I really want to think about all of the things you said and really use that, but it can't be a, you know, necessarily a law, like a semester project, it's a class.
I mean, I say, if you want, if it's just one class is on this issue, one of the ways of getting them to, maybe just for variety, is to just have that one class, instead of lecturing, or instead of discussing the readings, have them debate the readings that day.
That's what I wanted to do, and that's how I'm figuring to get them, trying to get them to speak.
So instead of a lecture discussion, we're going to have this group and this group present on the readings and have a debate about it, and then you can ask them questions. I think that's a great way of using it. It's a one-shot thing. And you don't even have to assess it like a group project or anything. It's just assess it the way you would your normal class participation.
Yeah, and I have a colleague coming in who's an expert in bilingualism.
Oh, right. Well, then they can judge the debate. That's great. They can say, here's who we think.
Okay, that's an idea.
You can have them comment on the debate. Sometimes people, like I've done that before, I bring in professionals. Sometimes they feel uncomfortable saying one side one or the other. And so commenting on the debate is always a good out for them. Especially, oftentimes I will have university administration come in, like if we're debating a university issue and they don't want to be, you know, they don't want to be construed as representing the university. So I take that off the table right away and say, well, you can just comment on the arguments and how the university deals with these issues, and whether these issues are relevant to the university's policy-making bodies. And they're much more comfortable with that. So, okay, no, that sounds great. It sounds like a great
I'll
assignment.
give it a try. I don't know how it'll go. You know, you're always afraid they're not going to speak.
Well, yeah, well, you know, let them know you're going to do it, and let them have a say about how it should be structured, and their anxiety will go down. Because the reason they have anxiety is they want everything spelled out for them. They want to feel like they know what's coming.
Right.
And in this kind of assignment, they don't really feel like they know what's coming. So they really want some hand in it. So the more I've had them help design rubrics and to speak about what they would like to see, then they feel a lot more comfortable about performing. I mean, there's still anxiety there. They still are like, I don't want to go. Can I get out of it today? There's still those kind of students. But you're like, no, it'll be fine. Everyone's friends here. Everybody's cool. They're just very happy that they're not going today. They're going to listen to you because they're very happy that it's not their time to speak. And then they usually do it, and they're usually some of the best people in the class. So don't let them fool you.
Sometimes I remember from a business ethics class, one of the things that stands out, it's 25 years ago, but it was where he assigned us to be debating about various different things. And I remember vividly, mine was about insurance and whether or not insurance companies should be able to have cats.
Oh.
And that's 25 years ago, and that's the one thing that I remember was we kind of forced us into the debate.
Yeah.
It was a great learning.
Yeah, it always reinforces that stuff quite well, I think. So. Any other questions?
Yeah, do you have because sometimes I use debates in my classrooms, but not as an extra assigned, assignment or homework, so they do research and things like that. Sometimes I do it about the textbook, where they just read and then they debate that way. But I want to use it, I don't know if this is possible, I want to use it as a skill. So when we're learning about different skills, for instance, we're learning about listening barriers, I want to use debates as the background and use it to show how these are listening barriers, you know what I mean? So I just use it in the classroom, meaning they just can go online, do a little research of little something, not necessarily these gigantic controversies.
Right.
But, and then use it as a grounding for what I really want to teach, which is the skills. Because I found out that using it in that way is much easier and better. I mean, they enjoy it differently, than sitting there and say, well, barrier number one.
Yeah.
And, lecture and all of that stuff.
They use it as a text they help to construct. And then they all become critics of that text.
Right.
Using listening as their theory. So they say, oh yeah, I can see here where they didn't listen to so-and-so. And they didn't. I mean, the students are going to be well prepared to have a bad debate. You don't have to do a lot. You just have to kind of set it up, and they'll have a really terrible debate. Because, I mean, look at our culture. It's full of bad debating strategies, bad argumentative ideas about argument, unhealthy models of rhetoric and discourse. So yeah, that's great. That's a great use of it.
Yeah,
I like the strategic use. I'm not a purist in the sense of the word, so I think that's great. I would do it that way too, because if you set them up and then they have the debate, you can say, oh, look at how they, here's this example and this. So now let's try to, one of the things I might say is maybe do it again after you taught them the different listening skills, then have them do it again and see if it improves.
That'd be
Yeah, because then that'll show them the immediate benefits of using these steps.
This has been great.
That's great. That's
Thank
great.
you so much.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
No problem.
I think it'd be, I don't know if it's helpful, you know, you do it, repeat it again, do you know what I mean? Like, we try it out and then, you know, kind of,
I mean, I think it's
next
good to
year
have
or
a-
whatever, or
Semester,
next
something, yeah.
semester, and then,
Yeah,
you know,
if that's
build on it.
Only
you know.
if Steve will agree with
If he'll agree, yeah. Well, I see him around the hall, so
Oh,
I,
yeah.
you
So
know,
you can encourage.
I'm gonna
I'm
like,
always up there using the photocopier or something.
yeah, yeah,
Fax
so
machine.
I'll just like,
Yeah.
grab.
So yeah, but if you guys want more specific detail and formats, I've created
Yeah.
a campus guide on debating that you can find under my name on the campus guides. So you can look at that, and it has video examples of different international
Can I
formats.
link
What's
to
a
that
campus
for my campus guide?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's
Thank
called
you.
Global Debating, and it also has some RSS feeds from the top bloggers, global debate bloggers. So it's kind of cool because when you go on there, you're getting all the news, and it's like results from the Toronto InterVarsity Tournament, results from the Manila Open, results from the Sydney University Classic. So you can like, you know, if you don't have enough sports junkie stuff to follow, you can follow collegiate debate if you want to know. So collegiate international debating.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, you're welcome.
thank you.
You're welcome. Let me know if I can help you with your projects. I'm always happy to
Thank you.
help if I can.
So Steve, I don't think then, considering like what I was just telling you about, then it should really be like a formal stand up and speak for 5